Good evening and welcome to Red, Gold, and Bold, a Kansas City Chiefs football podcast. With us, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Eric Eager coming to us straight out of his home office there in the vicinity of PFF.com, Pro Football Focus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City as we break down any and all things Chiefs. If you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live every other Tuesday right now. Very soon we'll be back to every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Central Time is when we stream live. We can check out your comments if you're joining us via the YouTube, if you're joining us via the Twitch, if you're joining us via the Facebook. You can watch the stream as well on Twitter, but no way to comment on Twitter. So if you want to make a note. Also, we would ask, be kind. Hit us up with the likes, the loves. Don't cost you nothing, but does a lot for us. So if you think about it, give us the likes, the loves, positive comments, positive feedbacks. Are always appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us here tonight. And gentlemen, let's talk about it. 'Tis the season of the power rankings, right? That's what we do this time of year. We start putting out power rankings. I know Peter King, your buddy, Eric, had a power ranking out that it went Bills, Chargers, Chiefs.
Not only that, but Peter called me on Friday and asked me for 2 sentences on every single team.
Really?
And I think he even put this in his column because I was like obviously giving him all the Lions propaganda in the world, but he told me he was not going to listen to me about the Chargers. So he put the Chargers second, despite his friend Eric telling him not to.
So what advice had you given him?
I just basically. I told him what I thought about every single team, and I probably for some teams pushed him up or down like 2 spots, but he's all in on Herbert. I don't think that there's really anything that could take him off that, to be quite honest with you.
Are you okay with that 1, 2, 3 where the Chiefs are, Jeff, behind Buffalo and the Chargers?
I'm not a huge power ranking guy because I know how they actually work. I've been involved in the making of power rankings at ESPN, so I don't know how Peter does it. Who was actually a friend of mine. We used to work together at Sports Illustrated decades ago. I look, it's on paper. Are the Chargers better than the Chiefs? Yes. I would have a hard time making a case based on what the Chargers have done, what they had going into the season, how much Herbert's developed. I don't think they'd be 2, though. In my mind, you'd look at the Rams or even the Buccaneers as being the second best team. They'd be in my top 5. Chiefs would be in my top 5. But I would say that I would take Buffalo, certainly number 1. But then after that, I would take Tampa Bay, the Rams, and maybe even Green Bay before those 2 teams.
All right, let's start with why Buffalo definitely number 1. What is it that makes you think because they were, nip and tuck and went to overtime with the Chiefs, and now you like their offseason better? It's simple as that.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you could have made the case last year that if they had beaten the Chiefs, they had a pretty good chance of winning the Super Bowl. That team is what don't they have right now? They've got an elite quarterback. They've got plenty of weapons around him. They've got a defense that for most of the year was number 1 in the NFL. They added Von Miller. They added O.J. Howard. They added Jamison Crowder. They got better at a lot of positions. They're well run. They're well coached. They have the heartbreak factor the last 2 years, being in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, watching the Chiefs celebrate, being within 13 seconds of beating the Chiefs last year. I'm one of those people who thinks there was more about them blowing that game than the Chiefs winning it in the last 13 seconds because all they had to do was play defense for a couple downs. So
no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jeff. Go ahead.
No. That's why I stopped there. I got plenty more I could say about it, but
yeah, I think because I find it interesting because I think you've said something that I've repeated many times. I think is a great way that every season is kind of its own entity, right? Now you have to have a starting point for everything that you do. So if you're, going to have a power ranking, you start somewhere. And where do you start? Where do we finish? That's the natural progression of things. But
not at PFF though.
Oh,
what do you mean?
but we'll get to that.
Okay.
What do you mean?
The Chiefs being number one last year going to power rankings, even though they lost the Super Bowl.
Oh,
Well,
I see. Yeah, I mean, okay. Yeah, but the Bills, Soren, I'll push back on a couple things, right? Like the last season does matter as far as, how we're going to power rate a team. But I'll disagree with Jeff. I think and maybe just from my Chiefs fan perspective, sweating through that game, Kansas City had a 9-point lead at one point in that game, and it would have been a 13-point lead had Butker not missed an extra point and a field goal. They had with a 2-point lead, and the ball in deep in Buffalo territory, ran a option play to the short side of the field to Blake Bell to make it a 5-point game. Then gave up multiple fourth downs on a drive, including the one where Gabriel Davis made Mike Hughes fall down. If they get a stop on that down, they're taking knees and the game's over, right? Yes, Buffalo choked with the 13 seconds, but a number of things that Buffalo had to overcome just to get to that point were immense, right? You had the Tyreek Hill, if they call Tyreek Hill for taunting for throwing up the deuces, the Chiefs probably come back and score with not enough time for Buffalo to come back and win, right? And so on and so forth. There's so many things that were noisy that Buffalo sort of had to overcome, for that, to sort of, happen the way that it did.
Jeff, that's kind of a straight rebuttal to you. You want to jump on that, but because I've got a couple of thoughts.
Well, I think you can always go back at any point in the game, any game, and find places where you can say this team didn't do this, this team didn't do that. Ultimately, the Bills were ahead with 13 seconds to go based on Josh Allen making a couple of great plays down the stretch. And I didn't see anything the Bills did, the Chiefs did in that game at that point that were about the Chiefs making great plays. It was about the Bills allowing them to get in position. I think I'm not a numbers guy, but if you were in the numbers of that situation multiple times, I'm guessing that the Bills win that situation more often than not.
Talking about the last 13 seconds?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what about the previous 59 minutes or whatever? I think there's certainly a case to be made that Kansas City sort of outperformed Buffalo in that game prior to, sort of anything that went on.
Well, I can make that case about the Chargers losing.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
and the second time they played.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a fair assessment. I'm just saying, from my perspective, in that particular game, I thought the Chiefs played as well as Buffalo did, if not better. But then at the same time, okay, so I'm going to come back because I'm talking out both sides of my mouth. I think Buffalo is the best team in the NFL. The reason I do is just because of a philosophical difference between what the Chiefs are doing right now and what the Buffalo Bills are doing.
Wow.
If the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl against San Francisco, I think they probably have a different approach to this offseason than they did, right? But with a Super Bowl in their hand, they go ahead and trade one of their best players. They go into the draft, they build for the future, they make a ton of great moves, including, by the way, which I talked about today on Twitter, pushing Patrick Mahomes, basically paying out Patrick Mahomes' roster bonus of $27 million or something. They do all these things because they're a little weaker than Buffalo when you look at offensive line, and not even offensive line, just defensive line. When you look at, actually the secondary, I think it's actually a wash if White is injured and stuff like that. But at the wide receiver position, they have more depth. At the quarterback position, they're not quite as good as Kansas City, but in that vicinity. Great head coach. And I think this is important, and I think this is baked into a lot of people's power rankings. Buffalo doesn't have an easy slate, because I don't think any team in the AFC has an easy slate, but they have an easier slate than the Chiefs do. And so I get why Buffalo is pushing it all in. As a Chiefs fan, though, I'm happy I'm happy with what's going on, because I think the Chiefs are going to be better than Buffalo long term, because this thing's going to, if Buffalo wins or doesn't win this year, it's still going to have to be torn down at some point. And, you look at Diggs' contract, that's going to be, a pretty big ball and chain. You look at Von Miller's, that's going to be a ball and chain by the time he's not good anymore. Obviously Allen's deal is a big deal, so on and so forth. So I look at this team and I say, okay, the Chiefs just did take a step back this offseason. They're still third favorite, and I have them third in the power rankings behind Tampa Bay and Buffalo, but Buffalo is slightly ahead, and they're slightly ahead in the poll to win the Super Bowl, which I think it shouldn't be, but it's embedded in these people's power rankings.
Yeah, I think, listen, there's a couple of things. I do come back to what Jeff said about, there is a starting point. I know, like in college basketball, KenPom, I think it's like once you get 21 games in, you've cycled through where you've completely eliminated. Like last year is a starting point, and each time there's a game played, it's a little less, a little less, a little less. I think it's at the 21 game mark. Gary Parrish, who comes on with me, does a great job covering college basketball for CBS, was explaining to me how KenPom does it. And after 21 games, they've completely cycled out last year. Last year is eliminated, from the process of how he ranks them, right? And his is all math and efficiency and all that kind of stuff. So I get it. I get you have to have a starting point, but I do think there's something to what Jeff said about every season being its own entity. And I think he's right, because it's never as easy as, okay, last year was our starting point. These are the moves added up. That team is the hot team, right? There will be a team that there'll be a Bengals, right? That's coming. And we could sit and try to speculate on who it is. I mean, I could take a shot. I have to go anyway. Whoever you want to pick on, when I say the Dolphins, I'm sure there's some people in Miami that are like, with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they've got
if there's a team and that's not guaranteed, it's maybe it's like Jacksonville, honestly. Like it's something dumb like that.
Or the Colts.
Or the Saints.
But the Colts are 9-8 last year.
Yeah, but I mean, to come and be a Super Bowl team, do you think the Colts are a Super Bowl team right now?
I don't.
So I'm saying that would be a surprise.
I really hope if the Chiefs get the wild card, they host the 4 or 5 games so Pat can throw for 500 yards in a dome in the playoffs.
Yeah, I saw your comments on Twitter about that. My point is simply this. I mean, number one, power rankings aren't a statement that this is the team that will win the championship. It's just the team that's starting the year is the strongest. So it needs to be taken in the context with which it's meant. It also is a false trophy. Who cares what the power rankings are? Because they're the one that had the Lombardi Trophy. So it's just a fun thing to discuss. And I think it's okay if you're a Chiefs fan. I think you should celebrate and like the fact that there are a couple of teams that are in front of you. This is the year that they don't have the target on their back for the first time in several years. And I think that's a better spot for them to be in. I think they've played that way. I don't think, if they can come into a stadium, now listen, if they start 7-0, it'll go right back on their back, which, go on the back of anybody who gets off to a great start. And we've seen
they started 7-0.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either. But my point. Like, anybody starts 7-0, you start to, the target starts to get placed on you. But I don't think it's a bad thing for the Chiefs to not be the team that everybody thinks they've got to knock off. I think for the Bills, who are carrying that without ever really having, they haven't gotten to the Super Bowl yet, and yet they're going to carry that responsibility. It's a lot to carry. We've seen it weigh on the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think it's fine to play in a little anonymity. If you're the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah,
but also, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say Green Bay's had that same weight hanging over their head. I mean, ultimately, you're right. It doesn't really matter. I don't think anybody in the league reads power rankings or cares about them or think they carry a lot of validity. I think it's a lot of people like us deciding, okay, here's who we like and here's why we like them. And I think what happens, not just in Kansas City, but all over the NFL, everybody gets all worked up about, why is it my team getting more respect? Why are they dismissing us? Why don't they believe in us? Oh, they forgot about this and that. I mean, ultimately, Buffalo is on top because there's more knowns right now than any other team in the NFL. You know what you're getting at literally every position. As much as we want to celebrate Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, there are a lot of unknowns about this team. We don't know what Marquise Valdes-Scantling will do. We don't know if Juju Smith-Schuster will stay healthy. We don't know if McCole Hardman will rise up and be a better player than he's been the last 3 years. We don't know what that defensive line is going to look like. We don't know if Trent McDuffie is going to be a player. There's a lot of things that, how many players are left from the championship team? Less than 8, 9? And so a lot of what they carry is reputation.
Yeah.
And so that is a factor here too.
Well, to me, I think the biggest thing, and this is something I heard, from a couple people, is like with Buffalo last year. They make it to the AFC title game in 2020. And, that was a team that was 0-5 in close games last year, right? They were 0-5 in one-score games from what I can tell, or from what I remember. They beat up on the bad teams, but they also they lose to a Jacksonville. They, even some of their multiple score wins, like week 18, they were behind to the Jets or they were only up by 3 to the Jets in the fourth quarter. Like the hard part with and you see it in other sports, like you see it in basketball too, a little bit, where the hardest part for the Bills is going to be getting to the playoffs, getting the playoffs with the seed they want without being bored, right? Because we've seen it in Baltimore too. Baltimore goes 14-2, they get knocked off, they get killed by Kansas City the next year, and it's just like they're a rudderless ship, right? Because that, for a lot of these teams, and that's why I started the whole thing with how important it was for Kansas City to win the 2019 Super Bowl. Because when you already have one of those in your pocket, you don't have to be desperate. Because if the Bills don't come out of this year with the Super Bowl, it's not going to be pretty, I don't think, right? I think, and there's some tactical issue. This is why I always defend the Chiefs for going all in 2020, because, you didn't know Allen was good. You didn't know about Burrow and Herbert. Tom Brady leaves the conference ultimately to screw over your Super Bowl hopes, unfortunately. Yeah. But going all in this year's AFC is a tougher bet with the Chargers and the Bengals and the Browns and even the Chiefs obviously still being good. If Buffalo doesn't win the Super Bowl this year, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to look like we shove a bunch. It's going to look like the Saints over the last few years.
How is that different from the Rams though? Last year in the NFC, when you look at what they were facing, what they were.
The Rams, when they made those moves, you kind of looked at it and you're like, they better win.
Well, I think it bears here are the preseason power rankings. We talked about Peter King, so we'll compare apples to apples with Peter King. Here is his 2021 going into the year: 1, Chiefs; 2, Bucks. By the way, you can get mad at Peter King because he too had the Chiefs, even though they lost ahead of the Bucks. Jeff, 2 Bucks, 3 Bills, 4 Browns, 5 49ers, 6 Rams. I mean, for the purposes of it, and I was in the process of trying to find the 2020.
It's an interesting question. Was he right or wrong about the Niners? Because in theory, the Niners were the Final Four team,
yeah,
but they weren't they weren't a top 4 team in the league, right? That's sort of a funny thing about about that take. And honestly, if Jaquiski Tartt catches a moon ball from Stafford, they're in the Super Bowl, and Niners over Rams would have been 3-0 last year, and he's right about that take too.
Well, so let me give you some context and some history to it. So let's go back to 2020. The Bucks would be the Super Bowl champions. Number 1 going into the season. Kansas City Chiefs are 1, Baltimore 2, right? 3 New Orleans Saints, 4 San Francisco 49ers, 5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
This is 2020.
That's 2020. And the Bucks would go on to win it. I mean, so he's to his credit, and none of us are saying anything negative about Peter. I mean, he's in the ballpark. What I'm seeing from this, and you go to last year's, I mentioned the Rams are at 6. Where are the Bengals? The Bengals were at
probably 24, 25.
I'm at 19, 20,
yeah, probably 27, 28,
25, 26, 27. Right.
Yeah, the Bengals were 150 to 1 to win the Super Bowl last year. So going into the season. So and that's, to reference our listeners to this, right now, the teams that are 150 to 1 to win the Super Bowl are Detroit.
Yes.
And Jacksonville.
Your beloved Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions, which we've discussed your passion.
He put them in the playoffs last time we spoke, if I remember, right?
Yeah.
He's put a lot of money into this.
The Lions are a playoff team in this year.
But so so the Super Bowl champion the last 3 years has been, or the last couple of years has been seeded 6th and 5th, right? To start things off.
To our point of you never win your own Super Bowl.
Well, somewhat. I mean, at least now teams emerge during the course of the year that will grab that, because as we mentioned, I would say It was the Chiefs Super Bowl in 20. And who was it? Who was last year's Super Bowl that the Rams took?
In Tampa.
Packers.
Tampa.
I mean,
No,
it was,
the team that was
Green Bay was favored going into the playoffs, so I would say it was the Packers Super Bowl.
Green Bay was the favorite going in, so they took the Packers Super Bowl. But to me, I think the moral of the story is you want to be top 5 or 6.
Yeah, you want to be in the you want to be in the basin of competitiveness every single year. That's, I mean, and honestly, not to bring this back to Kansas City again, but that is where we find the Chiefs, right? That is why I think all of us are fans of what the Chiefs did, because they might have taken a step back, and I'll concede that, I think, fairly strongly. But they're still in the bait. Like, any one of us could see them going through the AFC as a 5 or 6 seed, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they could miss the playoffs.
I mean, Jeff,
they could miss the playoffs.
I know they can, but I don't want to make another bet with you about the Chiefs making the playoffs.
Let me ask you this. Can the Chiefs miss the playoffs if Patrick Mahomes starts 16 games?
No.
It's possible.
It's possible. I think Jeff's right. By the way, speaking of,
monkeys might fly out of my ass, right?
Yeah.
That's possible.
So you're willing to sit here and tell me that you think Marquise Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, all these guys are going to work out, and he's going to be playing with this great. I'm with the belief that losing Tyreek Hill is a big loss on offense, and until the other guys prove they are better players, I'm not just going to concede that he's going to create some magical offense.
But this is a team that went to the playoffs in 2013 with Alex Smith at the quarterback. And what was it? Donnie Avery and
Donnie Avery had the baggy sleeves, though.
And what was the AFC made of then? What was the AFC made of then?
I will.
Like 4 teams? 4 legitimate teams?
I will grant you. It's tougher sledding. The AFC.
And Peyton Manning, remember, was
the Viking,
what? He had just gotten – he got the Denver that year, or was he out that year?
No, he was there. He was there, and he was ruling the roost. And
But can we just pause for a sec? The Chiefs won the Super Bowl in 2019 while throwing 3 third-down passes to Demarcus Robinson in the Houston game. All of them got dropped. Like, this team can overcome receiver play that's not tip-top, I think.
It's not the same team, which is the point I'm making. They've got new people.
You're right. They don't have a new quarterback. And they don't have a new head coach.
But that's the other part is that we've been dealing with. Okay, so I guess the question for any, for Jeff, I guess, because Jeff is a little down on the Chiefs, and I wouldn't say he's like hating. I think he's being reasonable, but
they're top 5.
Yeah, but the question people have to have about Mahomes, the last 4 consecutive years, his yards per attempt have gone down. You look at, NGS data or whatever, linebackers don't move against the Chiefs, right? They literally don't bite on play action. They don't flow against the run. When you look at box count above expected, so basically every team in the NFL has levers they can push to get teams out of too high, except for the Chiefs. Every defense against the Chiefs looks at them and says, we're playing too high. No matter what, you can come out in goal line, Madden, 3 tight ends, 2 backs, and we're going to run too high against you, right? That's what the Chiefs have had to do. And they have decreased their productivity every single year. From all accounts, Patrick Mahomes is okay, if not happy with the Tyreek Hill trade. I think in many reasons because of this rut that they were in, as far as what teams are doing. McCole Hardman, I know Sam was on the show on your show, Soren, either today or yesterday. McCole Hardman was 5th or 6th among wide receivers yards after the catch. That had become the offense that they had to be. Spreading out the risk at the wide receiver position, along with having a more adult conversation with Patrick Mahomes about what his responsibilities are, plus getting a running back like Rojo, and it sounds like Clyde Edwards-Helaire was never healthy last year. Having a more balanced offense, I mean balanced as in all the deep targets aren't funneled to one guy. I think that's going to be a positive for them.
And I want to ask this question because I'm not trying to throw it all on Patrick Mahomes, but was Tyreek Hill open on the last pass he threw last year? Right?
Where else do you put that ball on Hill?
Yeah, but how many throws has he made towards Hill in those situations and he's caught it?
Right, I know, but flattery. Just flatter me. And
he wasn't. No, he wasn't open.
He was not open, and yet he threw that ball. And I think there is something. Now, listen, Demarcus Robinson had flubbed 2 before that, so there's a reason like where he probably came out and said, "Screw this, I'm going to my guy," right? Like, or one of my guys. But I think that is a bit of a dangerous mindset to be in. And if he can have 4 guys, if they can be healthy, which Juju Smith-Schuster not healthy very much. Marquez Valdez-Scantling usually misses some games. Those of us that have had him in fantasy football can attest to that. We don't know what Sky Moore is going to be. Good prospect, but we don't know what he's going to be. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're better at receiver, but I can tell you that if all 4 of those guys are healthy and live up to what they've shown, right? Like what it takes to be a second-round draft pick in the NFL as a wideout, what it takes to be 6th in the NFL in yards after catch for McCole Hardman, what Marquez Valdez-Scantling's done. Although if they live up to the neighborhood of what their capabilities are, I believe that there is absolutely a scenario that has this passing offense being better.
But what if they don't? That's the question. What if they have a Ravens type season?
And as far as like their ability to throw the ball?
No, I mean guys getting hurt.
But what if the Bills do?
Yeah,
then they will suffer. That's what I'm saying. It's like they can't have these things happen to them.
But again, we're going for the point of the power rankings.
Yeah.
So we're ranking every team based upon their best case scenario, right? Isn't that what the power rankings are?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
also, our friend Matt's off the cuff gaming did make a really good point, which was Tyreek Hill had 23 drops the last 2 years. And the Buffalo game, one of them was a touchdown. The ball that Pat threw him against the Bengals was on his body. Like you make that, like that's a superstar catch type of play. Von Bell ends up with the interception. Chiefs end up losing.
And my bigger point on the receivers. Sorry to interrupt you, Eric. My bigger point on the receivers that I guess I've been very slow and cumbersome at getting to is, I think changing the receivers may help Patrick Mahomes evolve even more.
I agree with that.
And so I think the fact that it can't just be like, I'll throw it up in the air and let Tyreek run down under it. The fact that he's now going to have to say, okay, what is the biggest mismatch? And it's not always the first idea shouldn't be it's Tyreek Hill because he's faster than everybody out there. He may become a better reader of defenses. He may put the football in better spots. I think the Chiefs will run the ball more. Jeff, you can't dislike that if that's one of the things you're going to do.
Yeah.
I think they're going to pound the rock. I do think that there is, and this is what I'd be curious if you could ever get an honest answer from Andy Reid, which he never would answer close to this, is once you come out of, like I was trying to talk to Tim Grunhard about this today, like how much do you really get done at OTAs and mini camps? Now, it's been a long time since Timmy was in those, and he's like, yeah, not that much. He's like, I think they may go away. Andy Reid seems to talk.
They have OTAs back then?
Some sort of them, I think they started with him in that era, but Andy talks about it a lot. And what I'm curious is it really important in Andy Reid's mind? Do they build a lot on it? And was that a ship that set sail with a bad plan? And there's no time to change the plan until you get to an off season and can rework it. And Eric bitched all year about, and I think rightfully so, about how poor they were with RPOs, and that when they ran the ball, they were much more effective. And they had like a little 2-game window where they did that, and they were a more effective offensive team. But then they seem to fall back into the RPO rut, which I'm curious is because you just can't make those kind of adjustments, or maybe it's just Andy Reid can't, maybe other people can. But is it possible that now he gets a chance to hit the reset button? They're a more diverse offense. They're more equipped to handle this kind of defensive football. And I think the answer is definitively that it's definitively maybe yes, right? That's a stupid answer, but I think it's quite possible that that's the answer. And I think that speaks to what I come back to what you've always said, Jeff. Every year is kind of its own thing. And I think it's because they are building the structure of what the year's going to be. And if Buffalo builds a piss poor offense, like if they're not ready to handle the cover 2, because I think with the weapons they have, they're going to get the cover 2 all the time. Now their solution is to run the hell out of Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And if that runs him into the ground and gets him beat to crap, or they've drafted yet another running back who grades well in the tackles broken category, which, so did Moss and so did the little guy,
Singletary.
Singletary. if that doesn't work, then they may set sail on a ship that's not equipped to handle what they're
doing. And you look at Buffalo, right? I mean, there's a few things that Buffalo has leaky with them, right? It's the Allen stuff that could cause an injury. I mean, the guy's a moose. I remember when he dragged Frank Clark out of bounds last year.
He's Cam Newton.
Yeah, man. But Cam Newton got hurt
later in his career.
I mean, Cam Newton got hurt. Cam Newton got hurt.
MVP, 6th year.
Yeah, Cam Newton got hurt tackling a guy in an interception, and he was never the same, right? He had the spurts. So there's risk with Allen. There's also risk that Brian Daboll goes from Buffalo to New York City, with the Giants, East Rutherford, New Jersey, goes there to coach the Giants, and now you have a new offensive coordinator that's never called plays in a game before in the NFL level. There's risk there. The offensive line that they have is kind of one of those, every guy is average, so if you get injuries there, it might not be good. And then, as Jeff, I think, attests to a lot last year, they abandoned the run, right? They abandoned the run, and they get predictable on offense, and there were some games. I mean, the fact is they got beat 9-6 by Jacksonville, right? Like, there are just games where they flat out can't get anything done. Josh Allen's statistics all regressed last year, and some of it was they played some cold weather games that they didn't end up getting the previous year and all that stuff. But the Bills, like I said, I have the Bills first, but it's not that big of a gap between them, Tampa, Kansas City, and teams like that because of the risks. And I think we're all really well attuned to the risks the Chiefs have, but I think Buffalo has similar ones.
Okay. We've spent enough time beating up on the Bills as to why they may not be, at least Eric and I have, why they may not be better. I want to talk a little bit about the Chargers, who are also listed in front of the Chiefs, and then I want to get to let's take a bat to the Chiefs and talk about what could be wrong with them, because right now, at least Eric and I are very much spinning the favorable side, and I will give you some things that I think where Jeff could be right, that this could be a 10-7 team and watching the playoffs. Yes, that is,
and that's my point. Not that they're going to be a 7-10 team. That you could be 10-7 in this AFC and not be in the playoffs.
Yes, and I think it's fair, and I think fans need to acknowledge that, so that at the end of the year, if that happens, you're not like fire them all. They, how did this possibly happen? We'll get to that in a second. But with the Chargers, are we? That one I'll buy the Bills more because they've been there and done that, and they've made it to the playoffs. They put the Chiefs on the ropes in a playoff game, right? The Chargers need to, again, this is a predictive deal. So the Bengals had never pissed a drop, and they went all the way to the Super Bowl. So it's not a prerequisite. But the Chargers do Charger, right? I object to that one a little bit more than I do the Bills. Jeff, are you?
Yeah, I guess to go back to the point you just made, what I said, I think every year is different. And so I would imagine that Brandon Staley is smart to go look at the decisions he made over the course of this year that hurt this team on 4th down. They've obviously decided, look, we've got to improve our defense. And that was the biggest issue they had beyond the 4th down stuff, was that they couldn't stop people. And so when you add what they've added, when you bring in Khalil Mack, you bring in Kyle Van Noy, you bring in J.C. Jackson, I think the safety they got in the second round, J.T. Woods is a good player. You draft Zion Johnson, add him to an offensive line that's already improved a lot over the last couple of years. I imagine they will probably run the football a little bit more, be more physical, and try to establish that in the second half of game when they have leads. I'm not going to sit here. I'm still kind of on the fence about who's going to win the AFC West. I think the Chiefs, Chargers, and Broncos are all in that category. But on paper, I give the Chargers a ton of credit for where they are because, look, they were 1 win away from being in the playoffs. Their quarterback is as good as any quarterback in the NFL right now. And that includes a guy in Kansas City. That kid, Herbert, can do a lot of things. Just with Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, that level. Like he is a cyborg. And that was always the difference with the Chiefs and everybody else.
That
guy couldn't. What's that?
Beat the Raiders. Like I think they put wins and losses next to the quarterback's name for a reason. I think he's a tremendous talent. I think he's.
Didn't he beat the Raiders? Didn't he lead a comeback?
Not week 17 when.
But here's the thing.
Defense faded. That's the point I'm making.
But they only had like 10 or so points in the first 13 maybe points in the first couple quarters. I guess my issue. So I agree that Herbert is as talented as everybody in the league except for probably Pat. And
he's as talented as Patrick Mahomes. Physically, you think he's more talented? That he's less talented physically?
Patrick is the best scrambler in the NFL. He has the best arm in the NFL. I think that like Herbert doesn't do the arm angle stuff that Patrick can do. Like I said, I'm splitting hairs here because Herbert is then 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, and he's certainly going to be a bust. Stop here. But when I think of the thing that is a little interesting to think about, and this is going to be me again out of both sides of my mouth. If they beat the Raiders and they go 10-7, right? That Chargers team could have had the same run that the Bengals had. Bengals had the exact same record, 10-7. And again, we're looking at the Bengals and everybody's like, oh my God, why are the Bengals this, that, and the other thing? And it's like, well, again, the NFL is a really noisy thing. And things that happen in January and February tilt our opinion of a team way too much. And the fact that the Chargers didn't get to play those games, kind of tilts, I think, the skeptics like me and Petro. And for a team like the Bengals, it makes us think about the Bengals longer than maybe we should because they strung together 3 games. Frankly, one against a bad Raiders team, one against the Titans team that was stepping on their junk the whole game, and one against the Chiefs team that all they had to do was cross the end zone one time in the second half. And then we're looking, the Bengals are this, that, and the other thing. And they're a 10-7 team, just a game ahead of what this Chargers team was. Chargers team doesn't get the playoffs, so we just think of them as they can't win. On the other hand, we've seen this song and dance before. Carson Wentz through 2 years, right, was a very encouraging quarterback of a 7-9 team as a rookie. Sounds familiar. And then in 2017, he was an MVP candidate who, was really good on third down. And you think about that Raiders game, and there were 6 drops in that game, so that was not Herbert's fault. But all of those plays that Herbert made in that game were on 3rd and 4th down, right? Any one of those high leverage plays doesn't happen. And we're not even talking about the fact that the Chargers couldn't stop the run and could have kept the tie game in tow. So again, not saying he's going to end up like Wentz, but after year 2 of Wentz, we all thought that guy was on the up and up.
Well, he also tore his ACL.
He also tore his ACL, but
factored into it. Yeah.
But there are aspects again that where I think with both Herbert and Burrow, where we're too early to crown them and put them in a list of guys who have done it for far longer.
I agree with that. I do think Justin Herbert's more the real deal than Carson Wentz. But when Carson Wentz tore his ACL and the Eagles were barreling towards the Super Bowl, he was going to be the MVP. And Justin Herbert has never been on that run. He's never been as high as Wentz was.
Well, he hasn't been on as good of a team, though. This will say a lot about Justin Herbert. The guy came in off the bench, emergency duty, and almost beat the Chiefs in his first start. He's been a stud player. Since
Mike White beat the Bengals last year.
Yeah,
one game.
Yeah. He had a better year than Mahomes had last year.
First of all, that game, citing the fact that he almost beat the Chiefs coming off the bench, when you put a game plan together for one quarterback, what's his name, the Virginia Tech kid?
Tyrod Taylor.
And then you see Justin Herbert. Come on. You know as well as I do that you pretty much had
never played a game in the NFL.
He's good. Nobody's
you see Justin Fields' first game in the NFL with it. 3 weeks preparation.
Nobody's arguing that he's not good. And Patrick Mahomes' first game, he played with 20 backups and won at Denver. Okay, so I mean, like if you want to get excited about something, that was a more impressive performance in a first game, I think, than what Justin Herbert did
in a meaningless game against backups.
Every game the Chargers played in 2020 was
not
meaningless.
playing backups. They were not playing backups. The Chiefs played 20 backups. There were 20 non-starters.
But I guess played that game like they were playing for a playoff spot.
But we're splitting hairs here, right, guys? We're talking about Jeff's opinion that Herbert is as good as any quarterback in the league, which I think, by the way, is an opinion a lot of people share. Like a lot of people think guys like Josh Allen are better than Mahomes.
And we're not arguing that. He might be. I'm just not ready to say he is. I think he plays at a high level. but he, win some playoff games for Christ's sake. I mean,
but my thing also is when you look at, because again, I was talking off air with you, Soren, before we got on. It's like the characteristic of bad teams is they patch up all the things that are bad and they assume all the things that have been good will stay the same. Right. And so when you look at the Chargers, they went ahead and they got Sebastian Joseph Day to anchor the run defense that was so horrible. They get Kyle Van Noy, they get Khalil Mack to set a good edge. That's awesome. I don't think any of us are saying, hey, that's a bad move. They go ahead and go get J.C. Jackson from New England to pair with Asante Samuel. Like, these are good moves. And I guess the question becomes, if those moves are accompanied with Herbert playing the exact same, as good as he's played the last 2 years, that Chargers team is going to be a house. They're going to make the playoffs, and they're going to be tough to contend with. The problem is that doesn't happen. When Pat threw 50 touchdown passes in 2018, and then he threw 36 the next year, or whatever number that 26. It was 26 the next year. Yeah. Half as many. And so, like, and we don't, none of us think Patrick Mahomes in 2019 was a lesser quarterback than 2018. The production wasn't as good. So if the Chargers do all these things and get small better on defense, and then Herbert's not an amazing Pro Bowl quarterback like he was last year, like the outcomes are still going to suck for the Chargers. And that's characteristic of these teams that are not great.
Well, I want to offer this one, and then let's jump over to the Chiefs, because I think we can question this for the Chiefs as well. But why do Joe Lombardi is not good as an offensive coordinator,
right?
And they didn't upgrade that spot. Now, if that's because their quarterback's comfy, great, but the offense was crap in that game against the Raiders. I mean, I do think that they had come all the way through, and he had nothing new. He left his quarterback out there just standing alone, and it was impressive to see Herbert do it. But it was every freaking first down came down to fourth down. Yeah. That's a fundamental issue where he was out of bullets against the Raiders. And let's remember, the Raiders were with an interim coach, and he had no answer for that. So there's a lot on Lombardi to get a lot better as the OC.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I think it's a lot like what Josh Allen was dealing with in Buffalo until the last couple of years, where they decided we got to get him a little more help. We got to be a little more diversified in what we do. We have to be better in our game planning, and they figured it out. I think all these teams, ultimately, the Chiefs included, ask too much of these guys at a certain point. They ask, and they get burned by that. And so you have to, once you get burned, you got to reel it back and say, all right, how can we be effective, maximize this guy, and not ask him to be Superman every time he takes the field.
Let's leave the discussion of these three teams with this. Which quarterback is most likely to be hurt?
Of the three, the Chargers, Bills, and Chiefs? Well, who's been hurt the most of the three so far? Mahomes.
Allen missed like 4 games as a rookie, though, right?
Did he? I don't remember that.
I vote Josh Allen if they're going to run the hell out of him.
I guess my only concern is that the Chiefs opponents are all like, I mean, you're talking about defensive lines that are all really good, right? That division alone, it's Mack, it's Chandler Jones.
But we know Patrick Mahomes will not be asked to run the football 14 times.
Right.
He may not be asked to do it, but he'll be running. He takes hits.
It's different scrambling in back, and it is as opposed to coming up and taking on linebackers and safeties. I'll leave with that. I predict that I'll go ahead and say it. I'll put money on the fact that Josh Allen doesn't start 17 games.
Oh, okay.
I think
let's write that one down with Detroit Lions making the playoffs.
Yeah, that's fine, because and I'll take that every year, because until they quit running him, he's going to get beat to hell. And citing the biggest athletic freak of all time, and this kid may be the second biggest athletic freak, but citing Cam Newton and saying, well, he didn't break down until he was 29. I don't think that's the rule. I think that's the exception, and I wouldn't game plan based upon it.
I think it helps having a quarterbacks coach. Ken Dorsey's calling the plays, now the offensive coordinator. I think that they are probably mindful of that. I've talked to Brandon Beane. He's mindful of that as well. I think it gives their offense an amazing dimension that's hard to defend. But you're right. I mean, you're always at the risk of getting hurt, but all these guys run around now.
So let me ask this. Why, we talk about the offensive coordinator change in Buffalo. perhaps a deficiency with the Chargers. All we talked about coming down the stretch was the relationship between Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes. That seemed there seemed to be issues. There was rumblings that there were issues there. There were rumblings that there were issues with Eric Bieniemy in the conference championship game. We're all just ready to hang our hat on the fact that that's okay now. That they don't start the season sideways. I mean, that I think is a storyline that no one's talking about because there's been no games to look at. But I think everybody needs to be mindful when we head up to St. Joe to watch the Chiefs in camp. My eyes, when I'm up there, are going to be watching Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes and what those conversations are like. And I do think that, by all accounts, it didn't end well in that game. And are we so sure that it's going to just take off fine and singing Kumbaya and everybody's going to be feeling real good, Jeff?
Well, I think you have to ask the question, why didn't it end well? I don't think that had anything to do with the relationship between Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes. And I've said this from day one when it comes to this topic. Andy Reid calls the plays. Andy Reid decides what kind of offense they want to run. Anybody else who is involved in that process, if Mahomes has a problem with it, that's not an issue. I think if you want to, there's nothing Patrick Mahomes did poorly in 2021 that I would put on Eric Bieniemy. I think the things he did poorly had a lot to do with poor footwork, bad decision making, forced throws, and so
I'm happy with saying it's all Patrick Mahomes' fault. But
yeah.
Can they, if they're not all on the same page, is that you talk about scenarios on how this team could miss the playoffs? That to me,
do we think that the Matt Nagy situation does anything? Because I know the Kafka was Mahomes' boy, and even in that 2017 year, you got a great year out of Alex Smith. But it sounded like, Matt Nagy was Alex Smith's sort of coach and Kafka was Mahomes' coach. Like, do we think anything gets buffered by Matt Nagy coming in and being the new quarterback's coach?
I think it's the plan. It better
be. Well, again, it goes back to what has to be buffered. Like, what's the problem? I think that's what no one's ever really identified. I suspect Eric Bieniemy coaches guys hard. I suspect Mahomes is used to not being coached hard. I think that's where the friction is. If there's some other thing you guys suspect is going on, I'm happy to hear it. But I think it has more to do with just that approach to coaching and the way you're used to operating.
Fine, and I'm happy. It's all Patrick Mahomes' fault. I'm
not saying that. I mean, I would say with that in mind, you can have a combination of factors. I just don't know if the problem is if the problem is related to how Mahomes plays. That's what I'm arguing.
Well, I'm only interested in, is there a problem? Like from a predicting what the team's going to be. Like if you're going to go bet the over on the Chiefs win total or bet them to win the division, and for the Chiefs, try to do these things. Is there a problem? Right? Because by many accounts, there were issues as the season ended. And I think Eric's right. I think that Matt Nagy was brought in to solve that. And I think, yes, it's entirely possible that, now you have good cop, bad cop. Bad cop is Eric Bieniemy, who can now coach him hard and tell him when he's not doing the things that needs to be done and come down on him. And then Matt Nagy can give him a hug in the quarterback room and build him back up. I mean, I'm completely open to that being the perfect scenario. Absolutely open. I think it's their plan, or they wouldn't have done it, right? Because I don't think having Matt Nagy over Eric Bieniemy's shoulder is the best thing for Eric Bieniemy. It's certainly not a decision that's made to enhance Eric Bieniemy's head coaching candidacy. Because if they're better on offense and they figure out the cover two, what are people going to say? They're going to say, well, they brought in Matt Nagy. That really helped. So, I mean, I think they've done this to make the quarterback right. I mean, I'll go. Charlie Weiss said it a long time ago when he was brought in as the offensive coordinator under Todd Haley, but clearly not by Todd Haley, but by Scott Pioli. He said, let's be clear. I was brought here to fix the quarterback. Right. And he did. Matt Castle won 27 touchdowns and 7 INTs. Well, let's be clear. I don't think Matt Nagy's here to fix the quarterback, but he's definitely here to make sure the quarterback is chugging along. Like that's what he's here for. That's his job, and it better work. Is that fair?
So why do we let Mike Kafka get a pass in all this? If that's his boy, I'm saying if you have footwork issues, you got decision-making problems, your quarterback coach would be the first guy who gets thrown on the bus for that.
I don't give him a pass, and I don't think the Chiefs do either, because I think if they felt like he was absolutely the guy, they would have blown out. And if they thought Eric Bieniemy was a huge problem, they would have blown out Eric Bieniemy and made Mike Kafka the offensive coordinator. I mean, this is a team that waded in and took Tyreek Hill and then stood by Tyreek Hill. And I think Andy Reid's track record of hiring African-Americans and people of colors, the Ron Riveras of the world, would withstand them firing Eric Bieniemy if they thought he had to go. Right? Like, I think if he thought the right decision was to bump Kafka up to offensive coordinator and fire Eric Bieniemy, I think he would have done it, and he didn't do it. And so I think it's clear that they don't think that Mike Kafka did everything they needed him to do. And that's one of the reasons why he's in Philadelphia or in New York now, the Giants.
Yeah, that's fair. I just argue in defense of Bieniemy all the time because he was there when they were riding high. And there wasn't a problem then. And I don't see where, again, the things that Mahomes did last year that were not typical of his play, where you could pin it on Bieniemy as the play caller. I just don't. The way football works, the way staffs work, it's not set up that way.
Yeah, listen. I can't. I'm not. We'd have to know that Eric Bieniemy's calling all the plays, which I don't think any of us thinks is happening. And then,
exactly.
And so when you talk about footwork and technique issues, that's Kafka.
I thought it was in his contract, Petro. Wasn't that what the blog said?
Are we going to go with that? We're going to buy that one. Real quick, I want to hit a couple things real quick beyond the power poll. Who has to step up for the Chiefs to be a legit Super Bowl contender? And I'll fire on this one. The defensive line has to step up, right? Like it has to be better. They're going to need to take the football away, and that starts with pressuring the quarterback. That's going to have to be better. And I don't know if Frank Clark can have a resurgence. I think Karlaftis certainly helps. But somehow, the defensive line has to be better. And that's the biggest disappointment of the offseason. That really the only upgrade is George Karlaftis. With an offseason that began with Brett Veach, kind of pointing towards, look what we did with the offensive line, and now we're going to do that with the defensive line. And I'm not angry, and I don't think he screwed it up. The opportunities just didn't present themselves. They weren't able to overhaul that the way I think, would like to have done. And that is the scary part. If you want to give a reason why they're not one or two in the power polls, the defensive line does not look like it's gotten, made enough progress to say that, okay, yeah, with Khalil Mack and Bosa roaring off the edges with the Chargers, that they're going to be able to. It does look like against better defenses, a lot is going to be on the offense again for this football team.
I'll be even more specific because I think for all of us, we want that we want it to be broad and everything. Chris Jones has to play. Like, he has to be the second best defensive tackle in the NFL this year. Like, I've compared him, like from a disruptive standpoint, like he needs to be John Randall, like he needs to be, Cameron. I mean, I'm not even looking for Cameron Hayward, like, because I think Cam's a good run defender, and nor do I necessarily need the guy to play the rundowns. If he goes back to what he was early in his career, which is a player who sits out first and second down, and maybe they get a couple like just tough guys in there instead of him, and he comes in on third down and gets pressure 20% of the time. Like that's how they have to win, right? Chris Jones has to be the second best defensive tackle in the NFL, I think, for this defense to be Super Bowl caliber. That's on the offense. On the defensive side of the ball, it has to be Chris Jones. Chris Jones specifically. They're paying him a lot of money. He's not living up to that pay. He's a great player, but he's not living up to the money that they're paying him. And it was cute when he was on his rookie deal. He's not on his rookie deal anymore. He has to play up to that level. And I think on the offensive side of the ball, it's actually fairly clear. I think out of the four where you have Hardman, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Sky Moore, you're going to get two guys in that group that are pretty damn good. I think the statistics bear it out. I don't know which two, but I do think you're playing the numbers game right. You add Kelsey to that. That's going to be a good receiving corps. Orlando Brown has to play like an actual franchise left tackle. Like, again, it's not cute anymore. He's being paid $16 million a year, $17 million a year. He has to play like a franchise caliber left tackle. So those are two guys. Both of them are making a lot of money that have to step their game up this year for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I would say the defense obviously is the big concern, just because of what you mentioned on the defensive line. I don't know, having watched Steve Spagnuolo throughout his career, I don't know what a defense without a strong pass rush with him coordinating looks like. I know that they've kind of gone to this, what's become kind of the flavor of the month in the NFL, of loading up your secondary, doing what the Ravens have been doing, what the Patriots have been doing for years, just more cover guys, more flexibility, more variety, mixing up your coverages, guys who can, basically a bunch of Tyrann Matthews running around back there. But again, if you don't have someone getting the quarterback's face, you saw how that looked in the Bengals games. And that's where I go back to, they could miss the playoffs just on those things alone, just on not having enough firepower to stop a team when you have to stop a team. And I know that's hard to fathom because of what they've been. But yeah, I think 10-7 can get you out of the postseason this year. They could be like what the Dolphins were, where you end up with, last year was 9-8 did it, but 11. I mean, a lot of 11-6 teams in the league this year, probably in the same division as this team. And that's what they've always been able to rely upon is, end of the day, as the Patriots did back in the day, well, we're going to get 6 wins against the division. We know that. We know the Broncos are going to Bronco. We know the Chargers are going to Chargers. The Raiders are going to Raider. And you can't rely on that now. And so, yeah, I think that's the big factor for me. I'm not ready to concede that the receiving core outside of Kelsey is going to be that reliable. I think I have to see that to believe it. I think we are Juju Smith-Schuster 3 years ago was a pretty good player, but he's missed 17 games the last 2 years. Marquez Valdez-Scantling got great speed, great size, but he's never caught more than 50 balls in his career. Had never had more than 700 yards receiving. Again, McCole Hardman, it's put up or shut up time, and Sky Moore is a rookie, and so you begin to look at these things. And again, it's not to say that they can't be a Super Bowl contender team. As long as the quarterback's there, they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. And the coach, but end of the day, there's a lot of unknowns here, that just because they've been great doesn't mean those guys, you plug them in and you just stay great. I think every team goes through their moments when you're trying to transition into something new.
I do like this comment from Brett. Is Chris Jones the Tyreek Hill of next year's offseason? If he has 15 sacks, I mean, I certainly would. I would spin him. I would trade him with 1 year left. I would not give him another big contract. So if somebody would give you even like, I think you're looking at, if you could get the 2nd round pick for him next year, yeah, I would move him, but he's going to have to play well, right? Tyreek Hill had 100 catches and 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns. I mean, for Chris Jones to have that kind of season, he's what Eric said, 2nd best offensive tackle after Aaron Donald. He's 12-plus sacks, from that D tackle spot if he's going to do it. Do you have a non-rookie breakout? I'll go with Justin Reed, who, looking at the PFF grades, the last 2 years have been brutal. The first 2 years were pretty good. You back up and get him into the previous regime and their ability to work with him. And I'm assuming the Chiefs didn't give this guy the money they gave him to come in and be a 50 on the PFF grading scale, that they see what was obviously wrong and how he was being used. And he's going to be an impact guy at the safety. Now, whether that's more like a Cam Thomas coming up and thumping people and not really a turnover guy, but I think you're going to get good play from Reed. And I think that's, I think he's a guy that he damn well better, because they gave him the money to be a guy to make an impact. I think he's a non-rookie, a big non-rookie breakout candidate. I think most people are going to pick the wideouts. It's Juju, it's Valdez-Scantling. But I think Reed is a guy that could come in and play pretty good football, because he did it his first couple of years in the league.
I would say, and I think Freyfrey doesn't like my opinions, by the way. He thinks I'm always being super negative. Yeah. You haven't seen me super negative yet. Willie Gay. I think Willie Gay has shown the athleticism. I think he's shown he's made some plays that I think you haven't seen linebackers make in this defense. I think Derek Thomas level. I mean, Derek Johnson level ability. I mean, I specifically remember the play against the Titans when he snagged like a crossing pattern, just jumped up. He was like 10, 15, 12 yards deep and just jumped in the air and just snagged the ball, made a big play against the Giants. I think that if he's able to find consistency and they're able to, I don't know where he's at mentally as far as handling the defense and what they want to do with him, but if they can give him more opportunities to be a disruptive playmaker, I could see him really being a force in this defense.
Yeah, I like that one. I also like. I thought about this. Terry says Nick Bolton, and I think that's a possibility as well because his coverage skills seem better during the season than a lot of people thought he could do, and so he's going to get a chance to play all the downs. And if he shows that he can cover a little, we know what he can do against the run. I think he's going to be really good. Eric, you got a guy?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at younger guys. This is a weird one, but I think it's somebody like Rashad Fenton. Like, I think, if he doesn't step up, like, this defense is going to depend upon a lot of young players at the cornerback position. And that's fine. And I think that they're preparing for that. And I think they're preparing for him to leave in free agency. This is year 4, the last year of his rookie deal. But if he could step up because I know that they really like him in the building. If he could step up and sort of man a corner spot the way that they haven't really had, since Breeland left, and even Breeland was a little bit sketchy, like, that really helps their defense out, right? Like, it means that some of the younger guys can sit on the bench for at least some of year 1, and they don't have to be as fragile on defense as they were last year.
Yeah, I think interesting defensive guys are where we're looking, right? Like, I mean, I think that has to happen. I think there's an expectation that the defense will be better, and I think if they've got better overall talent, everybody who is good has a chance to shine brighter. I think that's a possibility. I'll say this: if Frank Clark blows, they're in big trouble. I mean,
Melvin Ingram's a bigger loss than people are discussing, and I've heard, like, on A10, people have said, he's a situational guy.
I mean, I'll wear it. I don't.
I didn't hear you say it. Other people were saying it. Well, I just think that they don't have anybody else of his caliber to be able to even rotate in to that defensive line. I think he gave them a huge boost. What's that?
You don't think Karlaftis will play at that level?
I don't know. I can't say. I know that Melvin Ingram did, but I can't say that. Hey, rookies have an adjustment period? I think they're hoping that. But I don't know. I haven't seen him play against, Rashawn Slater. I haven't seen him play against a top flight left tackle or a right tackle in this league. I mean, I just think having a third pass rusher. I look at what the Broncos are doing now when they went out and drafted Nick Bonito. You add him to Randy Gregory. You have Bradley Chubb. You got 3 guys.
I mean, when they won the Super Bowl, they had Von Miller. They had, like, Shaq Barrett. Shaq Barrett was off the bench guy that could bring heat. Like, Malik Jackson. They were coming at the quarterback at all angles. That's the worry for, like, like, let's just put it this way: it would be really nice if Joshua Kando could be something for this team.
Yes,
it would be like if like, this is like, and I. Jeff called me a degenerate before the show. He's absolutely right. But this is like when a game's losing by 15. Like today, the Dallas Wings, they're down by 15. I come back and they're winning. Like a game I didn't expect to win, and they get it. That's awfully nice. It'd be awfully nice to come back from dinner and see Joshua Kando, a good football player. That'd be nice. Right? To have a third pass rusher.
But I'm going to push back on the Melvin Ingram thing. Like, you can't at one point say they couldn't pressure anyone against the Bengals game and then go, wow, Melvin Ingram's
yeah. Melvin Ingram was part of the problem.
But those two things can't.
What do you guys think of this? What do you guys think of this, by the way? Niners might cut D Ford. I mean, as long as he's not on the field for the last drive of the AFC Championship game, I'm kind of a big. I might like having a guy come off. I mean, the guy could bring heat on the quarterback. He can't set an edge to save his life.
He can't stay healthy.
He can't set an edge, and he has one move. It's a speed rush.
Look,
that's it.
How many moves does Joshua Kando have right now? I mean, I'd like to wake up one day and have him have one, but at least, but D Ford has one.
He does have one.
Well,
I'd like to wake up and see Tershawn Wharton being able to get pressure in the interior of the defensive line. Like this is my request for you, the Chiefs. In the building over there, develop one player from last year's draft that you didn't think was going to be good.
So,
Soren,
you had
an A+ draft otherwise.
You think the Chiefs are better off without Ingram? You don't think he could have helped them this year?
No, I think he could help them because of what we're talking about. I think you do need like 4 defensive ends, and I think they've got
1.5.
Yeah, right. I mean,
they're going to bring back Alex Okafor, and we're all going to be like,
yeah. They
who was Taco, the guy from Michigan? Taco
Charlton. A guy was holding out hope that Jadeveon Clowney was going to be added to the mix, and I was going to feel much better. And I didn't think it was going to happen. If you asked me, is it going to happen? Okay. No, but I was hoping. I was holding out hope for Jadeveon Clowney, on a multi-year deal to be brought in, and and it didn't happen. I mean, because he looks like a Steve Spagnuolo guy, longer, linear guy. It didn't happen. No, I'm terrified about the defensive end. Would they be better with Melvin Ingram? Yes, they'd be better with Melvin Ingram. But I think the idea that, like, oh my God, what are you going to do without Melvin Ingram? No, I'm not terrified of that.
I mean,
I think he was gross. I know guys like Eric love the pressure rate, and pressures are important. And getting the quarterback to throw the ball early, I want it all. But his pressure rate wasn't that great. It was just better than the trash that they had before. And what did he have? 2 sacks?
Yeah, I mean, here's the question.
He had a big play against Denver. I mean, that was a pretty big
and
play.
Here's the question that I have, by the way.
You hit 1 home run, you're not a home run hitter.
Yeah. Well, what I would say
what if we get to late August and the Panthers realize that Matt Corral stinks and Sam Darnold stinks and this thing's going downhill fast and the Chiefs can throw a 2nd-round pick at him and get Brian Burns the same way that the Vikings threw a 2nd-round pick at the Jags and got Yannick Ngakoue, right, on year 4 of that deal. Like, what if they can, turn to, as you always, Josh Allen, Jaguars, right? They have DeJuan Smoot, I think is the guy's name. He had 50 pressures last year along with Allen. And they get Trayvon Walker in the draft. Maybe he's expendable. Like, I think that there are solutions here. I think some of them hinge. And so I think, to answer your question, Jeff, like, I just think Petro didn't want the Chiefs to be like, hey, you played great last year. Let's give you double what we gave you last year.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm saying he fits better if you get him for what you got him for last year or whatever you signed him. But if you sign him for a 1 year, $6 million deal, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
What you need.
And I think that's what he ended up with. Like, they put that tag on him so that if it got to the summer and he wasn't signed, they got him for 1 year 4, which I think is like a pretty reasonable one. Until they get the Orlando Brown contract resolved, like, they don't really have the money to be going after a player now.
Burns, Josh, these guys. Yeah.
Well, but Brian Burns and Josh Allen, you can, because they're at the end of rookie deals, and so they fit under the cap. It's just
fourth year too, not the 5th year expensive.
Yeah. It brings up the Orlando Brown situation where year 4 is cheap. And then you got to address it at the end of the season. But, I mean, again, this is part of the reason why you can make the case that they're not all in. They paid the Patrick Mahomes roster bonus. They're kind of not being desperate for any of these veteran players. And that's mostly fine. But I think if they get out of the preseason healthy and, it's fairly clear to us that Sky Moore can play or George Karlaftis can play or can't play maybe, they might make a move there.
Look, we're 68 minutes into this. I'm not going down the Orlando Brown road because I'm going to talk about my head exposure.
He's still recovering. He's still recovering from Pat's wedding.
Listen, and I get it's the business of the deal and you don't want to go to camp, but it's just, I'm sorry. That needs to be done. They gave you your dream of playing left tackle. Get your ass in there, negotiate, and get that done. Like, we need to have, like, the Chiefs making an announcement fairly soon that, hey, here, get through mini camps, and then I want to hear an announcement that, you know what, Orlando, we were calling a press conference. What's it for? And you get there, and it's to Orlando Brown is announcing that he signed the deal. That needs to happen, right?
How could you not know it was going to come? How could you not know that everything that happened this past offseason last offseason wasn't leading to this. A guy who said he wanted to play left tackle because he wanted to be paid like a left tackle wasn't going to be going after every last nickel he could get in a negotiation.
Oh,
it shouldn't surprise anybody.
It doesn't. I don't recall. I don't know if you recall, but I was the guy that was right there going, I think people need to get off Jeff's ass about him saying, I don't know that the guy can play left tackle at a high level. I mean, I was right there with you. I'm not. I think it was a desperation move, and I don't think it was a bad one when you're, all in to win. Here we go. Now I'm going down this road. But I don't think it was a bad move. But the Chiefs have just got to play the game. But I'm tired of, like, for me, I don't want to hear the Kansas City media sit there and lob softballs at him because he's a good quote, right? Like, I if you're all about the team, I think you know where this is going and get it going. And listen, I'll say the same thing about Brett Veach and the Chiefs. If they're just slow playing this, I mean, I guess okay, because they're saying we didn't need to go after a defensive end. But I don't know. And if I find out, I'll bitch about whose fault it was. But I think it sucks that you're sitting in the situation you don't have this done, because I don't think Orlando Brown has the right to ask to be the highest paid left tackle in football. And I think the Chiefs sold their soul to the man as a left tackle. They have to pay him as a left tackle. So if they're trying to nickel and dime him down at right tackle money, which isn't that far from left tackle money anyway, then that's dumb. They need to get this thing solved. But I will say this: if their plan is screw you, you're playing under the franchise tag, and they're willing to let him sit out and put Joe Thuney at left tackle, then more power to him.
That might be the play. I'm starting to lean more toward that being the likely outcome of all this.
And I'm fine with that. Because if you're like, listen, we kind of had a handshake deal on how this was going to go down, and now you're going to try to leverage us, we're not playing that game. And I don't care that we lose the draft pick if you're only here 1 year. I still think you can trade him for at least 50 cents on the dollar, and you move on and you establish the culture of your team. Don't dick around with us. When we're going to do something, you want to play on this team and compete for a championship, then you live up to what you say you're going to do. That's what I think should happen.
You know what helps in that situation? Having a trusted advisor in your ear.
You mean like an agent?
That's yeah.
I know that's the other thing. Like I would have loved to have had an agent. I've never had an agent, right? And I would have loved to have had an agent and gladly give up. And trust me, the 4% that they pay, which is they charge more in my line of work, but I would have gladly given 4% of what I'd make, which I will feel much more than Orlando Brown would feel the 4%, to have somebody take care of that crap. And I got a lot more going on. Right? Just I don't have to.
Well, Petro, I know you host 3 podcasts, your own show, you have a wife and kids, but Orlando had Pat's wedding. Come on, man. You locked.
I'm out. Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network, NFL.com. Check out his great work there. Eric Eager, PFF, Pro Football Focus. You can check out his work at PFF.com. My name's Soren Petro. You can see me at 810WHB.com or on the 810 frequency in Kansas City. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on Red, Gold, and Bold.